Now we come to uh, something that we don't often do on the watching brief, even though I'm sure most months there would be the opportunity to do this if we went looking. But this month, two archaeologists came to our joint attention, and specifically via their obituaries and lovely things written about them, having recently died. Um, the one that I certainly spotted on a friend's Twitter account was uh, a New York Times article about Iris Love. The headline says Iris Love, stylish archaeologist and dog breeder, dies aged 86. And when we were talking about this month's watching brief, you certainly seem to have a fascination with this person. We'll come back to her in a moment. But also there was the news that Aubrey Burl had died on the 8th of April, aged 93, an elected member, an elected fellow of the Society of Antiquaries in November 1981. So a real, um, well, it looks and sounds as though he was a real gentle giant of prehistoric archaeology, in so much as much to my shame, I know, frankly, we can't all know all archaeologists, but I don't think I'd consciously heard of him. I'm sure I must have read something he's written. In fact, I probably have something back there. But um, he looks like a dapper gentleman, and it sounds as though people had great respect for him. But what why did you want to mention Aubrey and Iris this month?
Primarily because I think they represent two strands of 20th century archaeology which are really important, and both of them as well have lessons for us as archaeologists in the 21st century in terms of their life experience and the way they approach their scholarship and their
Hmm.
archaeology. Um, Aubrey Burl was well, he's described as a scholar and a gentleman of the old school in the very best sense by another of the antiques, Terry Manby, in the obituary that was published by the Society of Antiquaries. Uh, he was probably Britain's, at the time anyway, for a long time, certainly in the late 20th century, Britain's leading archaeologist of the Southern British Neolithic, and particularly looking at stone circles.
Hmm.
And I'm no prehistorian, as you know, but uh, I've got books by Aubrey Burl on my
Hmm.
bookshelf as well. Yeah, particularly his books on Stonehenge and Avebury are um, still widely read and quoted. Although obviously there's a lot more field work has been done since he was most active in the 1950s and 2000 roughly. Um, but the thing that I really wanted to mention was, as well as the scholarship, which has been widely recognised, a lot of the obituaries have also recognised how he was just a really good writer.
Hmm.
He could make the site sing in a way which was very engaging to read, but without losing the scholarship. And I think there's a lesson for every archaeologist.
Hmm.
You know, yes, academic reporting is fine at one level, but if it's going to last, you need to be able to write too. And the
Hmm.
best archaeologists can, and Aubrey Burl certainly could.
Hmm.
So I would say to anyone who's watching this who isn't aware of his work, um, do uh, search out particularly his books that were produced in the 1970s primarily. So Stone Circles of the British Isles is one. He also wrote books about Avebury and about Stonehenge. They're all worth a read.
Hmm.
And as I say, the and for their scholarship and for their elegance. Iris Love is a very different case. Now, I have to say for my sins, I had not heard of Iris Love, mainly, again, probably because I'm not American, I'm not a classicist.
Hmm. Hmm.
But there's also an element of the uh, the she died aged 86 on April 17th in New York, and she's one of the people who sadly has been carried off by COVID-19.
Hmm.
Um, but for a period, it appears for a period in the 60s and 70s, um, she was one of the first generation of really sort of American celebrity archaeologists. She was um, if I just give a couple of quotes from the New York Times obituary, which I
Hmm.
do urge people to read because um, I can't wait for the screenplay. To be honest, this is a
Okay.
life. This is a life that needs to be filmed. You know, forget Lara Croft.
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
do Iris Love. Um, uh, Here we go. Sunburned, leggy, and with a mop of cropped blonde hair, Ms. Love was catnip to the press. When in 1971 the New York Times wrote about her for the third time, she was 38 and several years into what would become an 11-year dig at Knidos, an ancient Greek city that is now part of Turkey. There she discovered the temple to Aphrodite on the same summer's day in 1969 that
Yes.
Neil Armstrong went on the moon.
Yes, yes. No, no. I had heard of her. I remember
Mm.
people used to joke about how Love had found love. She had found a temple to Aphrodite. Yeah, no, I had heard of her. Okay.
But more to the point, um, uh, she lived, you know, openly with a gossip columnist called Liz Smith. So you know her own life was pioneering in terms of develop the acknowledgement of women's sexuality,
Mm, mm,
um,
mm.
and and then not content with having this career as a classicist, she went on to become a breeder of champion dashens.
Amazing,
You know,
amazing.
you
Um,
could not make this. You could not make this stuff up.
no.
Um, Now, what's really interesting as well is that the acknowledgement. We've often acknowledged the brilliant work that trailblazers have done in terms of highlighting the work of women archaeologists
Hmm.
um, in the past and now,
Hmm.
archaeologists and scientists. And there's some very interesting comments that quoted in again in the New York Times obituary about the kind of things that Iris Love and her contemporary women archaeologists had to face. So, for example, it's the uh, the New Yorker noted in a profile in 1978 that she didn't have a degree, and that irritated some other professional archaeologists. Also, she was good at fundraising, and that was a little bit that money unclean.
Mm, mm.
She
Well,
came
which
from
is which
a
is
rich New York family, so she
yeah.
understood money. But
Mm. Well,
you know,
that's still very much an issue
but
in archaeology today, isn't it? The relationship between archaeological digs, academic purity, so called, or some notion of it, and fundraising. How you get those three things to work together. Yeah. Mm.
yeah.
Um.
So she didn't have a formal degree. She didn't have she was good at raising money for her work, and she was a woman.
Mm.
And there's a couple of quote here that is quoted again from from the period in the 70s. Amazons, one archaeologist, Ms. Love's mostly female crew at Knidos. Quote, beautiful girls in bikinis, said another. But then it adds, Ms. Love's Turkish workers, however, called her Mr. Director.
Of course.
Um, you know, uh, but I think the key here is it's a quote from Maxwell Anderson, who was a curator at the Department of Greek and Roman Art in the Met, who's again quoting this again, obituary. And to sum it up, I think she had formidable energy and enthusiasm that separated her from the more cautious of her peers.
Hmm.
Archaeology relies on facts. Iris was given to informed and colourful speculation, which added coloratura to the discipline. She was a public intellectual in a way that was not typical of archaeology. My own response to that is, but it bloody well should be.
Yeah.
Because if archaeologists aren't public intellectuals, I don't know why we're in the business.
No, indeed, indeed. I like the follow-up to the headline. She was once known as the archaeologist in a miniskirt, a scion of
Yes.
New York, whose second career was raising Westminster Kennel Club champions. And to be fair, if you can pull it off, wearing a miniskirt must be very, very, very good in hot weather. I'm not sure I could
Oh,
pull it off.
but again, you look at the uh, some of the other things that are quoted in the article. One profile again in the 1970s notes that she can't use makeup and face cream because the dust would stick to her face.
Yeah.
It's that fetishizing a woman as this object that is made up and presents herself to the world in a particular way, which Irish obviously didn't give a stuff about.
No.
In those, and so it's fabulous. It's a fascinating life, great obituary. Please go out and look it up. It's brilliant.
Well, links below.
One to celebrate.
Yeah.